Hello, this is the Convo Guy here. Today I plan on discussing events and experiences that made me realize that I am indeed getting older. The first experience or event that made me realize that I am indeed getting older is when The Undertaker retired after 30 years of being in the WWE and WWF. Why The Undertaker? I believe The Undertaker was a real WWE soldier in the sense that he didn't switch to WCW. He didn't go to the TNA. He didn't go to AEW. He stayed the entire 30 years in the WWE. Of course, we know him for the streak at WrestleMania until he was defeated by Brock Lesnar. But as a whole, I feel like when we think WWE, we think The Undertaker. So when he retired, I felt like a piece of my childhood was gone. The second factor that I feel like was important in my childhood was Vince McMahon. I believe Vince McMahon did a good job with his creative and storytelling abilities. I feel like Vince McMahon did a good job giving good storylines to every WWE superstar. I'm not supporting him with the sexual allegations that has marred the later aspect of his life, which is something he's currently facing. I'm talking about the Vince McMahon from the 2000s and early 2010s. As far as creativity behind closed doors, I feel like he did an amazing job with that. Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown. So when he resigned from WWE, that was an indication that I was getting older. Because as kids growing up, especially if you are a fan of wrestling, Vince McMahon did a good job entertaining you. The third factor that made me realize that I am getting older was the divorce of Bill Gates and Melinda Gates that occurred in 2021. I was a young kid in the Ivory Coast when I even figured out who Bill Gates was. All up until his divorce, I always correlated his name to being filthy rich. So when his wife divorced him, it made me realize that money doesn't always correlate to happiness. I believe his name should be in Webster's dictionary. To me, Bill Gates means being rich. So when that divorce happened, it it messed up my mind a bit because I started thinking, how? Why? Is this even possible? You have all the wealth in the world and you're getting a divorce. So it made me realize that I am indeed getting older because having a ton amount of money doesn't correlate to true happiness. The fourth factor that made me realize that I am getting older is feeling like everything that was of fashion or anything that was trendy is overrated to me. As you get older, you just can't keep up with every trend or every fashion. You just gotta know who you are as an individual and just stick to something that's meaningful to you. Because if you just keep on trying to stay with the fashion and the trends, then you become a product of the world. You prove to yourself that you can be influenced by the world and by society. I started realizing that it's best to stick to the things that are classic and natural rather than just as the years advance trying to stay or trying to update to the trendiness and the things that are flashy that the world has to offer. The fifth factor that made me realize that I'm getting older was the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, this was millennials' version of 9/11. So during those years, we had to come up with tactical ways to make money. You have to think outside the box how to make money and at the same time help your family while not getting this virus. So this was a think outside the box situation on trying to maintain alive while trying to get your finances good for you and your family. So during this era made me realize that there are certain opportunities that are going to be introduced and you got to think quick on what you're going to do. Are you going to take advantage of it, or are you going to sit out? You didn't have too much time to think long and deep about it because you just had to be swift on the opportunity. Are you going to grab it, or are you just going to sit this one out, regardless of whether it was legal or something you just had to do briefly for the moment? So, this COVID-19 pandemic made me realize that there's going to come opportunities where you got to get it, whether it's going to benefit you or even potentially harm you. But the matter of the fact is, it's happening right now. So what are you going to do about it? The sixth factor that made me realize that I am getting older is watching films for their themes and their soundtracks rather than watching it for whatever the film's about. For instance, I've watched the Twilight series for the first time during the 2020 pandemic. Of course, you can't go out too much. You gotta self quarantine. I was just inside a lot. So due to that, I just caught up on films I just never had a chance to watch. Upon watching Twilight, I realized that I love the movies for their soundtracks rather than what the theme was about, which was werewolves versus vampires. The seventh factor that made me realize that I am getting older is rather than watching sports, I just watch 2 3 minute highlights of a summary of what the game was about, or just simply keeping up with the score on my phone rather than watching the game. Because as you get older, I don't know about a lot of people, but me, I just don't have the time to just watch a full game. That's just not in my repertoire anymore. So I still keep up with sports, basketball, baseball, football, etc. But as far as watching the game, I realized over the years that I keep up with the scores by watching the highlights. 2 3 max would be 5 minute highlights. But to watch the full length of the game, that's something that I just don't have in me anymore. The eighth factor that made me realize that I am getting older is accepting LeBron James' greatness. I admit now that LeBron James is the best player, but Michael Jordan is the greatest player. And a younger version of me wouldn't have admitted that. But now that I am older, I have to admit that there's things that LeBron James has done that would never be replicated. The ninth factor that made me realize that I am getting older is the death of the Dragon Ball Z character. This guy was indeed the godfather of the anime world. So when he died, I felt the need to retire from anime because all up until he died, I had watched Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Naruto, Satch Bell, Attack on Titan, and some other animes that I can't recall completely at the moment. I started Bleach, but never finished it. Upon his death, it made me realize that I don't want to know about the upcoming animes that are going to be coming out because I just feel like they won't be interesting because this guy just kept animes pretty interesting. Even even though he created Dragon Ball Z, he had his hands on other animes because he was helping other creators on how to better their animes. So with his death, it made me realize that I'm going to hang it up watching animes. The 10th factor that made me realize that I am getting older is realizing that I am not really a fan of sweets, cakes, donuts, Krispy Kremes, Pop Tarts. I have never really been a fan of. And as I got older, I realized that it was a good thing for me to realize that as I was young, because now getting older, it would have been a hard pattern to get myself off those sweets. The final factor that made me realize that I am indeed getting older is after graduating college, I realized that your inner circle starts decreasing. So a part of you has to force yourself to do moves solo. It's like you're forced to do moves solo. So that means going to a bar. That means playing basketball by yourself. There's going to come a point where a lot of activities are going to be done solo. And I had to accept that. And that's it, folks. That's my list on things that made me realize that I'm getting older. And to be honest, it was a hard list to think of. And that's my list. And I'm hoping to see what your list is in the comment section.